So I'd like to introduce you to Bruce Webb, Jez Vernon and Neil Thompson, who have been in the business quite a few years between the three of you, I think. So can I get all three of you just to give us a brief intro on your career
I'm
so far?
Bruce. I started as a producer, so I've produced about 7 or 8 feature films now, either as a line producer or as a co-producer or a full producer. I've directed a couple of feature films and I direct TV now, which sort of feeds into my film work, and I also teach. So, but I dip in and out of producing still. So, and I suppose for this panel, I do a lot of micro-budget stuff. So compared to some of the stuff that you do, my thing is probably more under 250 grand. I made a series of 3 films for about 150,000 recently. They've all got cinematic releases. So,
very good.
I'm Jez. I'm bog standard freelance producer these days. Up until August last year, I ran a UK distributor and sales agent called Metrodome, which I've been at for a few years, and we also produced a micro-budget production slate there as well, which is very much led by what we felt the market was doing and what it could sustain. I left Metrodome in August and then worked with a couple of partners and on my own on pretty much at the moment a micro-budget up to sort of mid-budget feature slate.
I'm Neil Thompson. My company's called Formosa Films. I started off in music videos, actually, a long time ago when there was loads of money in it, and I directed over like 80, 90 music videos or something like that. Then we also moved into commercials. We had an office in London and LA, and then I got into TV a bit, mainly sort of trendy youth TV, but also did a bit of drama, and then we started a film company. So we've made, the company has made sort of 2 movies so far that were kind of UK for about 1.5 million type budgets, that were sort of, distributed, etc. And now we're kind of, I set up, I was one of the first people to use EIS and stuff like that and kind of create a model for the film business for it. So I also, as a sideline thing, do a lot of consultancy for that. So, and I also consult on some films, like I worked in a film called Stratton Big Action Feature, which is coming out next month. We're now mainly involved in co-productions for budgets that are about $10 million range, mainly with American finance, some with private finance here, and then as much soft money as we can cobble together through tax credits, subsidies, and so we're working with Germany, Canada, Canary Islands, all the usual suspects that I'm sure you've all heard of. And that kind of model, which I can go into later if anyone's interested, is kind of the new sort of model really for the higher budget thing.
I'm definitely interested.
Could be a long evening, so if you need a toilet break, put your hand up. Put any questions as we go along, please do chip in as well. We're going to move on. Going to start off talking about DVDs. Are they dead? Is there any money in them? Then move on more onto VOD, online stuff. And then move on to more just general stuff about filmmakers, what we can do to start making money or make some cash back. So can I start with you, Bruce? Can you talk to us about DVD sales? Do they still exist for you? Do you budget for them?
Yeah, do you know what? It was a very, when I saw this question was going to be asked, certainly the low budget features we've done, we've probably sold maybe 2,500-3,000 units, maybe.
How much you get per unit, roughly?
A very small amount, I couldn't tell you the exact sum, but we were talking about £2.50 from Tesco's up to £7 from Amazon. One of you said earlier on.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. But I had to go online to see what the sales were of DVDs these days, and there's still £1.1 billion worth of sales made with
last
DVD.
year it got the same as
still,
online,
so
it's 50-50 at the moment.
It's 50-50, and I'm really shocked by that. I thought that DVD was really becoming more of a specialist, with the way it was going the way of sort of vinyl.
Yeah.
I know vinyl's rising up, but certainly it depends on the sort of film I was making as well. So if I've got a TV movie, which is like the one I've just directed, I can't see that ever coming out on DVD, personally. I think it'll go VOD.
It won't come out at all on DVD?
I don't think so, no. I think it'll go VOD, TV sales. That was a feature film, made as a feature, but it's what I guess they call a broken release in that way. It won't do cinema unless the producer decides to pay for it to go to the cinema, as in she's willing to put up 10 grand to get a release,
Right.
which the distributor thinks is a terrible idea.
Would you call that forewalling?
Forewalling, yeah. But actually, she wants to do that to raise the profile of the film, raise the profile of herself, and obviously as a director, I want to see it out on the big screen. But I don't know whether that would ever see. But the film I line produced for Nina Forever, which is a sort of cult horror sex comedy.
Right.
That's the sort of thing that sells very, very well on Blu-ray. So a lot of collectors will have that in their collection.
Yeah.
So obviously, clearly, there is a market there. I think you two would know more about it than me. But as a filmmaker, I obviously want to see it go out on DVD.
Yeah.
And projecting to you earlier,
You normally have to have, is it
There's still money to be
screen
made.
release or something just to trigger some VOD deals, don't you?
That's moved on. There's a 10-screen release for a premium VOD spot on Sky, but yeah, for
They're still
many
buying,
years for Filmflix.
They're still buying everything.
Yeah, which is
Right.
ubiquity now. It used to be
Right.
a 6-screen release.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing is that you can approach an editor of a film section of a newspaper or a magazine. As soon as they hear the magic word theatrical, they're suddenly interested in writing about your film,
Yeah.
PR angles, whereas if they just hear the phrase direct to video or direct home entertainment release, the interest goes.
You've still got kudos about it, cinema.
Yeah, obviously it's not lying if you just withhold key information. We will be out in between 1 and 5 screens. You just use the phrase theatrical, but it's still the case that you can get a surprise and a small micro budget feature can break through because the critics judge it on its own merits and see merit there.
Yeah.
And then you will see not huge but some kind of uplift, and it helps with international sales and sales agents and Netflix, because a lot of these people on the micro budget side, they're not looking at algorithms, they're not crunching numbers. If you can send them a 4-star review from The Guardian,
Yeah.
that's good enough if they generally like the pitch, to secure a small SVOD sale.
Yeah. I know Sight and Sound used to review every release, didn't they? But they've stopped doing that recently, haven't they?
Yeah, because
too many.
it's just because of the abuse
Because of
by
the forewalling thing,
ex-distributors like me of doing that exactly. Yeah.
Right.
What I did find, I can't say what films this has happened on, but there's been a decision not to forewall a film because we knew the reviews would be possibly quite bad.
Yeah.
So you get 1 or 2 stars in every single newspaper. But actually the film is actually very entertaining for home entertainment for TV. You're actually destroying any long-term, you could be destroying any long-term sales for the film. So forewalling can actually be a very, very bad idea
Yeah.
for a film that's going to get badly panned in the broadsheets.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
better to
yeah.
keep a film in its quantum state,
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
well, the key reviewers haven't seen it, but I'm sure
Yeah.
they'd love it, rather than have them definitively say,
Yeah.
it's shit, avoid this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how they did it on Nina Forever, but they managed to get 3 reviews by 3 people that really loved it. And
There was a lot of
someone
love for the film.
very clever somewhere at Studio Canal managed to get it to the right reviewers, I think.
Yeah. I think chipping in just as sort of the ex-distributor, so I've been in distribution since 2001, and DVD as a format came out in 1999, and everyone who owned a catalogue of films had this huge payday all the way up to sort of the mid-noughties, because there's such a gulf between a clunky VHS. I don't know if anyone who's old enough to remember having to rewind it before you return it to the rental shop, or you get a thick ear, to DVD. That consumers saw that, whether it's narrowing down space on your shelves or getting rid of your old VHS. There were huge paydays had, and it was a huge thriving industry. It peaked in statistical terms in about 2006, and then it plateaued through to about 2009. And then there was a bit of a scrap over these new formats, HD, DVD and Blu-ray. But unfortunately, and consumers will always decide the value of something, most consumers felt there wasn't enough of a sort of a leap between a standard def DVD and a Blu-ray to suddenly just dump all of their old standard def discs and get Blu-ray. And then piracy has just continued unabated since the early noughties. And it's not a practical issue, it's a political issue in that politically the governments around the world are not prepared to do battle with the ISPs, and that's why it won't be solved. And then latterly Netflix and Amazon came along, and for people who are, because we're not talking about the 65 million people in Britain, you're just talking about probably sort of 5 million and below who are heavy film consumers. And, you know, whereas, you know, they used to go out and buy a DVD and it was like going to a very good gastro pub on the high street, and then one day a sort of an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet opens up next door and the food's not as good, and, you know, you feel a little bit sick afterwards through binging. However, it's just so much cheaper than going to the gastro pub.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've just seen DVD in absolute freefall since probably about 2009. And although it's still remained, you know, key revenue stream, and I say freefall, it's kind of slow motion freefall, so it's still with us for a while longer. But it just meant that those heavy DVD consumers were like, you know, I can grow to love monosodium glutamate. I'm going to go to the all-you-can-eat buffet. I'm just not prepared to kind of buy, you know, DVD for £8-9 anymore.
The trouble is now 4K DVDs are 35 quid each, aren't they? Who's going to? So you've got a 4K telly. You want to watch 4K on it?
It is true, but I think these are kind of attempts at niche marketing areas where it's, you know, you're selling low volume but very high margin DVDs, but there is a sort of general stink of desperation from the studios who are just, everyone is in just decline, you know, studios down to indies from the declining DVD sales.
It's like in the States, don't they? Like there's a thing, is it Premiere VOD, DVD or something, where distributors like IFC and Magnolia and that give a really, I don't know what it is, some fancy disc to like rich guys in Texas who have home cinemas and that. And they used to get it before the cinema release, didn't they? So they'd pay like $25 for it or something. Yeah. But you're right, I mean, that's a niche, tiny niche market.
Well, I mean, the big trendy thing that's coming through is Screening Room, which was set up by Sean Parker, who launched Napster. And actually, first I poo-pooed it, and then I read a brilliant article by Peter Jackson, who has earned his stripes, and I will read his articles. And what's interesting is they're talking about a $50 to $70 price point to see a film in your home through a set-top box on the same day as it's in cinemas. Yeah. But a third of that goes to Screening Room, a third goes to the distributor, and then a third is actually apportioned out to exhibition, to the cinemas. So this is suddenly, it's not as destructive or as cannibalistic. And I do think there is a problem with the footprint of cinemas that, you know, we all happily travel into London for a, you know, a panel conversation about film, but you've got people who live in these regional areas, and it can be an hour by car to go to a cinema to see a film which is not really the film people want to see. And I actually think there's some hope there that they might capture back this sort of lost audience who are now binge watching sort of saga TV storytelling, and actually bring them back to that sort of 90 to 2 hour format again.
Curzon, if you join the Curzon, don't you get day and date on Curzon films. So
yeah.
You screen at home or watch in the cinema or mix and match the whole thing.
In the BFI you get a discount on the BFI player as well, I think.
Yeah. And those places just felt like we're spending marketing money which is blanketing the nation, or at least kind of finding our consumers, but, you know, we're losing the people who just, it's too fatiguing, it's just too hard to travel and kind of find the film. Yeah. I don't know how successful it is, though, having seen some of their numbers, but the theory is good.
One thing I heard about DVD is it's going to sell at Christmas because it's really hard to wrap a download.
Well, did you know...
You're actually going to buy presents from people with DVDs still.
Statistically, I read today on the Pace website that a quarter of all DVDs are sold as gifts.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
So
like
that is...
Father's Day and things like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's face it, it's really, you know, the future is home entertainment, really. I mean, cinemas, well, it'll be a mixed. It's like all of these things, you know. You know, some people prefer to see. I mean, it's like, I mean, in the States, they've kind of been doing that for a while now, really, in that, you know, certain clever distributors in the States, you know, in San Francisco, New York, kind of young, upwardly mobile people like to go to the cinema and then talk about it afterwards. Other people like to watch it on a big high-def screen, and I think it matters, really.
What I thought was that, having just lived in Dublin, worked in Dublin recently, because they have, I don't know if any of you know Euromage, which we never belonged to, which was ridiculous that we never did. I don't know why we didn't. But it was a European cinema subsidy, is it? Would you
I think
call
we
it?
did belong and then got out.
Yeah, but in Dublin, for instance, there are so many cinemas. One of them's owned by Element Pictures,
Lighthouse,
Royal Element Distribution. And cinema going is seen as a very, very, very regular and cheap part of cultural life. And we seem to have lost that within our... And unless you're going to see a blockbuster, we're losing young people. I mean, kids I know don't watch anything on TV at all. They watch everything on YouTube. So they don't get into drama, and so therefore they only see movies at the cinema, strangely enough, but they're only big action movies, so that anything other than action movie, we're losing the audience. And so we're creating a sort of perfect storm in years to come in the UK where we've got non-cinephile kids, or people who are not used to the genre of non-action movie. Whereas in Europe and in Dublin, in Ireland in particular, we do have a very rich sort of film culture.
I think it matters though. I mean, you can't assume that the place...
It only matters to me because I make those sort of
films. The place to see drama is a cinema screen.
Yeah,
I mean, it
yeah,
isn't. Let's be honest, it's whatever,
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it's like they did a really interesting bit of research ages ago with the sort of gender gap where sort of females were much happier about watching something on a really small screen on the tube, catching up with a Amazon series or whatever it was, and where guys like things to be on some flash thing where you push lots of buttons or stuff like that, But it kind of doesn't matter, really. I mean, if it's on a watch and people are happy to consume it, it's fine, I mean, I think the whole cinema debate thing is kind of gone, really. I mean, cinemas are kind of a communal experience, so gangs of young people like to go and always have done. The grey market's massive now, and now they're doing opera and sports and all sorts of things, and that's great,
I think cinema has been the one constant. It was the first inception of the moving image, and that's actually sustained. And part of the reason is that the key exhibition chains, Cineworld, Odeon and View, are very, very aggressive about maintaining this 16.5-week window between something coming out in cinemas and home end. And there's a lot of press of saying, you should collapse the windows and roll it all together. I've got full sympathy for them because you've got a fairly solid business model which, skews depending on whether you've got a Bond or a couple of Star Wars or big kind of marquee titles, but it's pretty consistent. I've got absolute sympathy that they want to keep that window and stay aggressive on it. Otherwise, they will just collapse as a medium.
But they've got to be delivering a product that audiences will flock to see. I mean, the 3D thing they took a bath on. But what happened to getting splashed in the face with water and having a seat that rocks you about and that? I mean, that's just what they have to do. They've got to invest in...
They're out there. And
technology that you can't get on a TV. Otherwise, if you're just competing with a big TV, it's obvious, isn't it, to anyone? You're not going to be around for long, really.
It's true, although the multiplexes have really learnt the lesson of the boutique experience where you can sit in a sofa and someone will come and serve you drinks, and that's flourishing as an area.
That is really good.
The picture house, it's a bar with a cinema attached, isn't it? It's a bar and restaurant.
Exactly. Picture house is brilliant.
When we were trying to save a cinema in the Isle of Wight, a guy from one of those chains, I think it was Picture House, phoned me up and said, "Is there a Waitrose in your town?" And I said, "No." And he said, "But if there's a Waitrose, we'd have been interested in buying that cinema." I said, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, because basically, in a picture, I think it was Picture House, Curzon was one of them. In that sort of cinema, they don't sell wasabi nuts; they sell peanuts. Sorry, they don't sell peanuts; they sell wasabi nuts. They don't sell carling; they sell Peroni, and it's the same screen and the same projector and the same film, but it's a premium experience." And he wanted to know that it was middle class, educated retirees basically within that area, which is with the Waitrose model basically. So it was. I
mean, what are the stats?
A real enlightenment to me.
Is cinema viewing going down, or is it
no,
flatlining?
It's pretty flatline. It gets skewed by, a Bond or Force Awakens. Will bump it a bit and it might fall back. But no, that it's the one area where there's not a decline. Whereas you're seeing, other kind of formats rise and fall. But I think you hit the nail on the head that in all the research they said, especially in the Midlands and North East, people dress up to go to the cinema. And they will often, the whole idea of the multiplex experience, especially out of town, is you will have a meal or a drink and then you go out. It's a leaving the house experience. and it kind of delivers. You know, for a lot of people, you can predict the evening out you'll have.
Wasn't it the second most popular thing after football or something?
It sounds right. Yeah.
One statistic which is interesting is that British independent films have dropped like significantly, like over 20% in the last 7 or 8 years.
And foreign language.
On foreign language in the UK, that
yeah.
has plummeted. Whereas American, your working title, your British film like Star Wars, which is British, or Bond, which is British, has actually taken over that gap. So they've overtaken.
But that's because indie films are harder to make now. Really.
Yeah. I mean, we all know. I mean, we're probably all here. Everybody knows how hard it is to make independent films. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, can I move on to VOD?
Sorry, we only got the first question.
Done. How many days? I want to know how it makes the money back as well. Do you think VOD is going to catch up with DVD for income as an indie filmmaker? Is there any chance of it?
Not a chance.
You were saying £2.50 a go. You don't get £2.50 a go online, do you?
No, I just wrote. I mean, when I was queuing up these questions, I wrote no. I can't see how.
Can you talk roughly about? I know you don't talk figures, but what sort of cash you getting back online? Is it getting anywhere near paying your budget back, or
what, VOD?
Yeah, generally, all of them together.
Well,
to start with.
It's kind of still the Wild West, really. I think, to be honest with you, and it hasn't really settled. I mean, when we did a film called Clubbed, and at that time DVD was just about to start going because it came out in like 2009, 10, something like that, and. I mean, we did really well on DVD. There were about 150,000, so I did amazing business on that. But because, like Des was saying, because the deals with all the supermarkets.
So what sort of percentage of your?
But Sky, Filmflex and Sky Box Office, which were the two dominant VOD giants at that time. If I remember rightly from our figures, a third of our income was from VOD, which I was quite surprised about, in that we were still in the DVD age then, But since that, of course, it's all gone weird, isn't it? Because Amazon and Netflix have come to dominate things, and there's a million other platforms, and I mean, it's too confusing now.
How many units would a low-budget British film make now on DVD sales? I mean,
that's where I think you cannot generalise with low-budget British film. It is, and this is unfortunately where distributors like myself and myself have abused the system, because you respond to a trend, and unfortunately the reason why these trends die away is that a distributor who is desperate just to kind of pay the lights and just keep the franking machine stocked up, he will put some substandard, or she will put some substandard work out which falls under the halo of another film, do very well in a short term, but then you burn consumers, and then this trend dies away. So, for instance, we released this film called Tangerine, which is a very interesting film to discuss. Shot on iPhones, I mean, very well graded, a very expensive dub, very practiced director and crew. The iPhone thing was an economy thing, but it was a brilliant crew behind it. Something like that earned about 90 to 100,000 in the cinema, which would deliver back about 25% net. So we would make exclusive of VAT about 25 grand off a 100 grand box office, which includes VAT. And then on VOD, we probably didn't earn more than about £10,000. But then we made an okay, but maybe slightly cynical film about, it's about 4 years ago, called The Governors, about a bunch of aged ex-hooligans who decide to kind of return to their old council estate and help police it. And because that's a flash genre for the home entertainment audience, we probably made about 120,000 in royalties back from VOD. But you'll see, that was far below the quality and the critical acclaim of Tangerine. But this is where you begin to see something that will flare hugely in the home entertainment space, but people won't really entertain as a theatrical release, whereas something like Tangerine is the inverse. So again, there aren't these blanket rules you can lay on stuff, but you can play with certain genres which will kind of flare up in certain commercial spaces.
So how are you PRing it if you're not getting a cinema release?
On that film we did do a cinema release, but we forced it. So we forewalled a lot of screens. Actually, the PR on that, and there's people here tonight who are heavily involved in that was very social media driven. And again, we had key personnel involved in the film whose association brought huge authenticity and a sense that this was going to be a decent product, which at least kind of, deserved its stripes in that genre.
Yeah.
But equally, it's a huge frustration when you have a brilliant 4-star art house film, and yet you just find that home-end VOD audience aren't interested. But I think what has taken the whole world by surprise is that back in 2010, very highly paid analysts said, look, VOD is the future. We're going to kind of just go into a digital stream, single transaction culture. And that hasn't happened. SVOD has just come from behind and taken over.
Yeah.
Now someone can say, oh, well, that's good, so SVOD is the new future. But SVOD is not democratic. You have got buyers that are subject to huge pressures and variables, and they will literally say, yes, we will buy this, no, we won't buy this. And so suddenly this democracy of, if your film has earned its place, it can go through and find an audience. This is now gone, and there are bizarre politics behind the scenes. And also SVOD means that there's kind of far lower sums of money to go around in the indie world as a whole. And the reason for that, I don't mean it to be a diatribe, is back in about 2006, 2007, Amazon Prime and Netflix arrived in this country, and they headed straight for the big distributors, and there were huge bidding wars. So Lionsgate went over to Netflix, Studio Canal went over to Amazon, Momentum went to Netflix, E1 went to Amazon, and these companies were getting paid absolute fortunes for just putting a film in a cinema, and these fortunes would bump up once it hit box office levels. The indie sector, they still had to go to these guys and try and sell films piecemeal, and some would sell, some wouldn't. But this just created a huge schism, and it stopped the blur between the mini majors and the studios in the indie world, and you suddenly got this kind of massive polarity between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see Amazon just bought all the Sundance films, haven't they, for 100 grand each?
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Netflix
pay millions
just
to the
bought
mini majors.
Scorsese's new film, didn't they?
Yeah, for 105 million, yeah.
Or something
The
ridiculous.
Irishman, yeah.
Can I also say something you said earlier about piracy? You do not believe how much it affects us as small filmmakers. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds worth. If you've made a low budget art house British film, you're more likely to be, in some ways, to be pirated, because people are less likely to take the punt on actually going to see it or paying money for it. With the star system, obviously, that someone's big in it, they're more likely to take the punt. But we've seen film with two or three of the films that we've made. We've seen the film online being shared within 2 hours of it landing in HMV on DVD. By 11:30, you see it being pirated. And when you see amounts it's being seeded, for the films we're making for 150 grand, and you see it being seeded tens of thousands of times, you times that by £2.50 or £7.50. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it is a political thing. Why filmmakers can't make adverts about piracy, or why the government can't stop it, I do not know.
We used to use piracy in our marketing
Right.
on a couple of films with, because it was like, well, why fight it? Let's
Yeah.
join it. So
Yeah.
we'd go on all the pirate sites and they'd say, like, brilliant film. So we'd go to Tesco,
Right.
look, the pirates love it.
Right, nice idea.
Well, Kidult Hood and Football Factory have both admitted, distributors, that that's the route they use to just show take up and consumer interest.
Yeah.
I've downloaded.
Which did over 1 million, I think, didn't it?
Shoot.
Something like that. Some outrageous figure. It did.
Massive figure.
Yeah, broke records, didn't it?
I've had to download films that have been pirated that I've worked on because I haven't got a copy of it. And they've got better compressed versions on these things than I've got on my own edit suite. So the level of sophistication is quite
know what they're
unbelievable. But I think a lot of people don't even know they're watching pirated material because it's got an advert for Tesco's at the top, or it's got an advert for Adidas down the side. They don't realise that actually what they're watching is illegal, and it's a huge problem. And the drain on big companies like Metrodome must be, it must be just...
Small companies like me.
must be absolutely phenomenal. But it just, no one seems to do anything about it in the government. It seems to be completely forgotten about.
Yeah, it's a political issue. It's not practicality.
Can I talk about aggregators?
Yeah.
You've got any experience of working? Somebody want to describe what an aggregator is? 'Cause not they all do. So you worked with a few?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a kind of spawning thing now. There's a lot more of them around than there used to be, and some of them are very good. So basically, aggregators are people who have when all the VOD things started, if you're an indie filmmaker, you couldn't get access to iTunes or whatever and you couldn't get access to Netflix or Amazon yourself. You had to go through an aggregator or a big distributor. So a big distributor will have relationships with all of these platforms, and so does an aggregator. So they will charge you usually, I don't know, in my experience, we've paid 10%. So
10 to 15.
yeah, so normally, I mean, I don't know if it's the same because I've done it for a while.
£1,300 they charge you for one platform.
It used to be like 60-40
Who's charging that?
Distributor, a company called Distributor.
Oh, that's outrageous.
They pay another 250 quid, gets you another platform and another and another.
Is that a delivery fee? Is that a technical delivery fee?
Exactly. They do all the encoding and the captioning, and they handle everything for you. But
so the norm was 60% to the filmmaker, 40% to the platform.
Yeah.
So the aggregator takes 10. So basically, you're getting a 50-50.
I don't know if everyone realised the system before, but it was 10 to 20% to a sales agent and 30 to 50% to a distributor.
Yeah, depending on the deal.
Yeah. So any money you made from the cinema, you've already lost half of it already. I think you end up with a filmmaker's 10%. Do you? Like, does that work?
We should probably come on to distribution deals because distributors
that's a different thing.
will put across a very fair deal, but unless you know certain phrases, you will be stitched up.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is just the culture we work in.
Yeah.
But I'll probably come on to that in a second.
Yeah, but sorry, going back to so the aggregator. What you're saying is aggregators.
Yeah,
are better.
but what started to happen recently is that some of these aggregators, and they're kind of all over the place, that you don't have to just go to ones in the UK. There's one based in Holland that's really brilliant, who I know about. There's one based in Germany that people use. And they've got access to lots of interesting things. So basically, if you're going to make a movie now, and I haven't done this personally, but I know people who have, if you can keep the budget to around $250,000 or something like that, and you've got 100 grand of it or something from your uncle who's a dentist or whatever it is, and then some of the aggregators like the Movie Partnership or one, I know that if they like the film and you've got some cast in it that might have some level of worth, seemingly, or a groovy director or whatever it is, they can kind of. It's like pre-selling it, really. They can basically say, we'll get you a pan-Scandinavian Netflix deal, which we can get 50 grand for, and we can also maybe do this, which will get you another 50 grand, and we can also maybe do this, which will get you another 50 grand or whatever, and we can do some US thing with someone we know that can get you this. So you can kind of cobble together.
And is that cash
equity
they'll put in? That's actually cash equity they'll put in, is it?
Well,
they'll say we'll get this 50 grand deal, but will they actually? Will they give it?
It's not a mature enough market yet for there to be proper contracts that insure it.
It's probably estimates. It's
not an advance. Right. Okay. Okay.
But I mean, they know what they're doing, don't they? I mean, they're good guys. They really know what they're doing, and they they kind of more or less nail it. I mean, it's not going to be spot on.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is quite interesting.
No, that is very interesting.
In that if you can get, I mean, I know $250,000 is not a lot to make a film. It's really hard. You don't get a lot for that. But if you can somehow create something that has commercial potential, theoretically, you can make money out of sort of low-budget films, these days. And that's new. I've never known that to exist before, ever. I mean, normally low-budget films were all private investment, and they'd all fall over and take a bath unless it was a studio that made it and all pretending it was a no-budget film, and it was all lies.
I mean, my experience with aggregators has been really positive, actually. They've come in very quickly on a deal. There have been some messing around with deliverables, which was a bit of I felt I was being slightly conned on. But they, as technical deliverables. Yeah. And we found a way around it by getting it coded somewhere else.
Deliverables were expensive, there's no way around it. You got to get it in the budget, really.
But this model that people are talking about is releasing it for very, very low budget, like the things we make, is releasing at a film festival and then turning on the territory turning on the VOD in that territory where your film has just been at a festival. So if you're making it for absolutely no money and you're distributing it yourself, if you've got an aggregator that likes it, you can do the film festival tour, which works very well with children's films, for instance. There's a massive children's film circuit, film festival circuit, which is actually, it's a mini industry in itself.
Yeah.
And then you can turn on the VOD per country if you've got a very organised aggregator. That's something that we've heard talked about. We haven't done ourselves. So I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I think so. So to define the difference between a distributor and an aggregator, if you want and your film deserves and commercially merits a full singing and dancing theatrical release in cinemas, a huge marketing push, if it's going to go on every possible VOD and DVD platform, that is distributor expertise that you need.
Yeah.
But a distributor will want to make a lot of money from that before they pass any more money to you. And just to talk as briefly as I can about deal structures, the rule of thumb is that the more a distributor pays you, the less you will see on the back end overage profit share of the film. And one of the reasons
It means
is
you'll never see anything.
Basically.
yeah, but if you write down one
You have to
phrase,
read the code from a distributor.
it's true, but then again, you know, and I think this is the most important thing I can say tonight. No one needs to leave here going, shit, I need to Google everything on distribution contracts. What you need to do is find a legal representative or a lawyer or someone who understands that world and say, please, can we just use you fleetingly? And you know, I do this for people. I'm not marketing myself. There are many brilliant people, more brilliant than me, but this poacher turned gamekeeper. So when you read this very innocuous line in a contract that says MG and P&A recoupable from license or share, it just sounds so innocent, but this is the crux line. Because what a distributor is saying is, okay, we're going to pay to put this in a cinema. I'm going to give you a large or moderate advance for your film, but we're not going to make that back from all the money that comes in and then share out. We're going to take that from your share of the royalties. And if you're on a net average of 20% of the royalties, that distributor is going to become very, very wealthy off that film before they'll pay you another penny. But a distributor will bring a skill set and expertise, contacts, etc., etc. Aggregators, what they are, they're a conduit to market. So they basically say, we have a pipe. You know, we can go and speak to Netflix directly. We can put your film up on iTunes, Amazon, Sky Store. You know, we can even, you know, sort of sell your film in supermarkets, but we're not going to give it any love. We're selling a lot of product. Aggregators are a volume business. They might be presenting 20 to 50 things that week.
Yeah.
It is purely a route to market, but any PR, any marketing, any push, any love, that will come from you. But as a result, let's say you've got a niche product. So we distributed this film last year called Future Shot, The History of 2000 AD. British comic. You know, we knew the comic had a weekly circulation or bi-weekly circulation of about 10,000. And we knew that there were some ardent fans out there, but there weren't 50,000 of them. There were probably 5 to 10,000. So at that point, we took that film on, and instead of trying to shove it through supermarkets, which is, okay, high volume sales but very low margin, we put that film through Amazon HMV. We sold about 3,000 or 4,000 units. We sold the film to Film 4, but we made this great markup through Amazon HMV because it was a niche product. That product, if the producers had felt ready for it, would have been perfect for an aggregator because it's not complicated doing that marketing. What you do is you go to Facebook, you say, we want to hit all the people who have liked the 2000 AD page. You could probably reach about 100,000 of those with a trailer in their timeline for £1,000 to £1,500, and it's kind of job done. That and hiring a good, brilliant, cheap, freelance PR person to make sure the film is reviewed, that is perfect for an aggregator. But if you are pitching Moonlight into the market, you know, you need to be sure you'll contract that your distributor will do a BAFTA campaign in the UK. You'll contract that it will have a minimum 50 print release. The skill sets are entirely different. And one is brilliant for kind of broad mainstream product where you need someone to work it. But when you've got a niche product, which is high value to a small group of people, aggregators are brilliant for that. But the love, the passion, the other grease comes from you, but you will profit on the back end by using an aggregator.
Where does the sales agent fit into that? Does it?
Well, they're just someone else that rapes you.
Someone else who makes money when you don't.
Self-distribution, though, kills you, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you can't do it on every film. You have to
Yeah.
really choose your weapon because, you know, once you've done it once, you'll go crawling to a distributor the next time.
That's exactly what, yeah.
Because it's such hard work. I mean, you know, Jez, the way Jez describes it there, you go to this guy and do this deal and that deal, and you get a PR person in. That's exactly what you do, because you're doing everything yourself. But God, it's hard work.
Yeah. There's our screen, which is a screen on demand, as I'm sure you know about, which is where people buy tickets in advance and then the film gets put on. And that worked well for Nina Forever. They weren't going to give it a cinema release, so the producers decided to actually do an R-screen release, and Studio Canal supported them in that. Or Epic, I think the sales agent, they supported them in the idea of doing a self-release. But yeah, the work involved, taking the print up there, you know, greeting and meeting the fans, pushing and actually possibly buying the spare tickets so it actually does go ahead. You know, it's
I mean, are most of you filmmakers? What is most of you?
Yeah. How many writers?
What are you interested in particular?
How many writers are here tonight?
Yeah, any questions so far? Do you want to chip in?
How many directors? How many producers? And who are the people who are not putting their hand up at all?
They heard there's free beer.
Looking shelter from the rain. Yeah.
I mean, sales agents is a whole different ballgame. I mean, do you want me to go talk a bit about the bigger model? Because that's where sales agents come in, really.
Yeah, quickly.
So basically, if you're doing a sort of bigger budget film, like a co-production or something, one of the big sales agents here, like Hanway, Protagonist, Embankment, Bankside, there's loads of them. Well, there's loads of them that are not very good. There's a handful of them that are excellent, that are really good. They are critical partners for your film, because without them, you won't be able to make the film, really, because what they're basically doing is estimating what they're going to get for your film internationally. You don't really need them to do your domestic deal like your UK do. You can do that yourself, but assuming you can get one. But you need them to get the rest of the world. And basically what estimates they make, which are what's called sales estimates that you hear all the time, is dependent on your director, cast, genre, film, all sorts of wonderful scientific things that they go into. And with their estimates, you can, if you've got like money from, say, Canada, so you're doing a co-production with Canada, you've got a whole bunch of Canadian soft money, you've got tax credits, you've got regional finance, etc., etc., and then you've got a post deal and maybe a music deal or something like that, and you've got a couple of big actors have agreed to be in it, whatever it is. You can then take all of that to a company like Ingenious or one of the film funds or one of the private funds or one of the big EIS funds or whatever, and say, right, I've got all this, I've managed to do all this, give me all the rest of the money so that we can greenlight the film and get these actors, etc. And they will only do that based on who your sales agent is and what the sales estimates are. And they're usually looking for comfort of, if the sales agent's saying the absolute minimum I think I can get for this is $2 million, say, then they'll usually only lend you less than $1 million or $1 million less fees and commissions and etc., etc. That's kind of how it works. So that's kind of how films are made, really, these days, generally. So you've usually got about 7 different forms of finance all coming in, and it's all reliant on, well, more than anything now, I would say on cast, wouldn't you, Jen? It's become cast
It's a
obsessed.
biggie, yeah, but then the problem is that people come to people in the business and say, okay, give me the secret tips on cast that will sell. You know, just slip me the names. And so you start going Liam Neeson, Tom Hardy, and you're like, no, not the obvious ones. You're like, no, there's nothing below them. You're just into grey area. There are no secrets. It's just, there are very few people that flicker the needle or you bring on a film. However, I will say that there are techniques you can use with casting where, you know, if you're doing a film and you have a couple of sort of supporting roles for older people, Michael Gambon, who is hugely generous, you know, will come in and do a role, or
Jim Broadbent.
Ian Holm, Jim Broadbent. You're not necessarily raising the value of the film, but you are adding credibility to your film, so you're increasing the likelihood of a sale where there may not be a sale before. So while this doesn't make your film more valuable, a sales agent will send you an estimate for almost every territory, unless you've got censorship issues with the subject matter, in reality, most films will sell between sort of 3 and probably 12 to 15 territories. A lot of territories will just go unsold because that genre, that cast doesn't work there. So you can cast for credibility, but for God's sake, don't start overpaying that cast thinking that you'll get that money back because they're in the film. You're just merely improving your chances of making a sale.
Right. What about genre? Is genre still horror?
Very important.
Faith films are still huge. I was looking at statistics again. Faith movies are one of the biggest in the world for the amount of money spent. In fact, they are the biggest in the world for the amount of money spent. So if you want to make a faith film, which is a Christian film,
Midwest Bible Belt
That's a
America,
weird thing, yeah.
and not many other places.
it's bigger than horror, for spend.
And certain territories, if you have a purely religious message, you will not sell that film in a lot of Southeast Asia, where that is frowned upon and seen as an absolute no-no.
Ratings as well. I mean, so, anything over 50. We've in the past as producers struggled to sell things that were over 15 because they couldn't be bought for daytime television. And the last thing we did was a 12A, and it made a massive difference to the sales because it can be shown on daytime TV. Same with kids. There's a lot of European TV channels that desperately need kids live action. That isn't animation, so there is a weird mini market for kids live action, which is very specialist. But it does. You can actually make a small living at it if you're making really
when you work for a mini
films.
major or a studio, generally you do a different cut. So in post, you do like a sweary version. In fact, they give you this list. It's hilarious. Like, fuck, no, you have to use banana or something. So you have to get all the actors in and ADR all the lines so that. Mainly for airlines, especially for studios. Studios make you do this because they have such revenue, such massive revenue streams from airlines and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So you have to do a kind of clean cut for them. That's in the deal.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between creative endeavour, etc., and then you can just have a bloody good toolbox of stuff which is essential. So, for instance, if you're doing any film with regional accents, just be aware that if they are in the remotest bit strong, then that film will have to be subtitled for America, Canada and Australia. And people go, oh, is that a thing? Yeah, actually, do you know, that's the difference between getting half your budget back from the sale there and then someone treating it as a foreign language film. If someone says, well, I'm a Londoner and I'm doing a film in London, Michael Caine is an acceptable Cockney. It's actually very clear pronunciation. You can get away speaking like that. That's as Cockney as you can go in a film. Otherwise, you're making foreign language films. So Trainspotting was subtitled in other English language territories.
You have to subtitle to put it on VOD anyway, don't you? Closed caption? They won't take it without.
You certainly do on Netflix, but there's some platforms that don't take that.
Right.
Yeah,
I thought iTunes you did for some reason. I'm sure
on
they insisted
Netflix you
on
have to
something.
do. What did we have to do? We had to do all the language versions as well. You have to proof all that. Yeah.
But that's a different experience reading subtitles on a screen as opposed to just listening to someone talk and just taking it in. It recategorises the film and devalues it. Our sales agents, I think, where they are useful, and again it comes back to this point that to be strong and resilient in this business, you have to be prepared to admit what you don't know and accept that that is fine, and that's one of the golden secrets. Like hire, brilliant, prolific producers, they will go and talk and work with other producers who have got expertise in different areas, and you'll find producers who are brilliant on financing and structure and on marketing, useless on set, don't understand what different lenses are, but they don't profess to be. And I think you must move past this kind of fear that you need to be all things to all people, because no one ever is, and you'll end up being not that important to anyone. That literally is, that's the outcome. So, befriend a sales agent or distributor, and they allow them to be blunt with you. So if anyone here wants to make a British crime film set in the last 20 years, that film is hugely unlikely to travel overseas, to earn a penny overseas. 5 years ago, that was quite a thorough market. Germany were fantastic on stuff like that, but that trend is gone now. So do not go into it naively now that information has been presented. find a sales agent, get them off guard, or a distributor, chat, and they will be able to course correct you quite quickly. And then the other thing to remember is that there might be a brilliant genre flash at the moment, that if you start writing a film tomorrow, the earliest that's going to hit the marketplace is for 2 years. So don't rely on sort of quick flash trends. Look to a longer enduring, slow rising trend like grey pound cinema, which is not going anywhere.
You have to try and
quickly.
predict it, really.
Yeah, but there's no excuse for naivety. You have to go and talk to people, and you cannot just fall in love with this sort of passion project, which means everything to you and exists inside a silo. It is hugely unlikely to work. Yeah. And while no one can guarantee success, people who are good at their job can hugely improve the odds of success, and that's really what the game is.
Yeah.
Cool.
I wish I'd had that advice 10 years ago.
Because
we were making films because we were passionate about the film, not thinking about the market.
Yeah.
And you're completely right, not thinking about how we're actually going to sell it.
I'm guilty of these things. They say the greatest expert in an area is one who's made every possible mistake.
Yeah.
That's why it's good to self-distribute though once. Only do it once. Because that's where you learn all that. Like learning from the sales reps that go up and down the motorway every day. They really teach you a lot about what you're doing. I mean, it completely re-educated us about the way, the sort of films we wanted to make after actually, dealing with the blunt end of actually selling it and getting it out to an audience. That's when you really do. That's a steep learning curve.
What about Facebook for pre-marketing your film before you've even...
Certainly on Nina Forever, it worked amazingly well. I mean, we had I think the producer and myself had been on the transmedia course, which was just a 4 or 5 day course, which was through Skillset and maybe the EU, which was about building your audience before you've made your film. So by gathering huge amounts of data and likes and names and emails, then when we launched the crowdfund, we had an immediate amount of people that we could contact about putting into the crowdfunding. And then when the film was coming out for release, I think they had something like 2 million hits on YouTube on the trailer within the first month.
Right.
And that was entirely because you had 15, I can't remember how many it was, but tens of thousands of followers already.
Great.
And that over those 2 years, we gathered an audience and definitely made the mistake recently on a film where we didn't build our Facebook audience up beforehand. Right. But with some films, you can just do it as soon as it releases. I think for a very low budget film, it's worth doing it.
And how long was that process? How long did that take?
It was a couple of years,
Wow, a couple of years.
Yeah. That was a passion project, really.
Yeah.
I think my experience as a distributor, we released, since 2001, I've probably released about 50 to 60 films a year until late last year. And you really begin to see trends emerge and things change over time. And for an average French drama, which may have Catherine Deneuve in a small role, we're not going to build a website. We're not going to have a Facebook page. What we will do is kind of go to, some of the key French, London websites where you've got little communities and market to them. And I think it's a key thing. And again, it's only through buggering up, to the point of you finally have to learn the lesson. It's branded into your forehead. Where we would sometimes build in the early days websites, a Facebook page, and then absolutely brick it because no one was really going to see them or liking them in the weeks leading up to release. And then our focus would shift not from marketing a film and getting bums on seats, but trying to get traffic to these Facebook and websites pages. And it was just, our eye was off the ball at that point. And eventually we understood, and it's brilliant because there's nothing new under the sun. You just need to find the language which makes you actually understand what you're seeing. And after a while, it's imperfect, but I found this metaphor, which is, if you want to fill a bucket full of water, it's bloody hard work if you go and stand on the edge of a river and put your bucket down and then try and lure the water into the bucket. But if you go and stand in the middle of the river and just hold the bucket like that, it'll be full in seconds. And so if the water, in a hugely clunky metaphor, becomes, internet traffic, go to a very high footfall place where you know that there's some vague crossover between the film you're marketing and the people who are coming to that website. And so what we would do after a while, rather than build a standalone website, we would go to The Guardian, who would build a free website, and in return we'd take up X amount of advertising and plaster ourselves all over the film pages, knowing that that was our core audience. And then you get tens of thousands of people going to our website within The Guardian, and most of them were like, yeah, not so bothered about your 3-star French drama, but would love a holiday in Provence. That sounds good. But it's working and it's cost effective, it's fine. Whereas if you set yourself these impossible tasks of trying to kind of find, scattergun, people amongst thousands of people who would vaguely be interested in your film and say, come over here, it's exhaustive and it doesn't really work. So just go where the people are and then just say, listen, this is of interest, pay a tariff to kind of go into that mainstream of traffic. And it's just that much more effective.
Unless you get a film like Kajaki, which was an armed forces film that they raised huge amounts of money through crowdfunding. And that was a market.
That's a different
directly
skill.
So that was about soldiers trapped on a mountainside in Afghanistan, and they could market directly to ex-veterans, so they could go on all the veteran websites and Facebook pages, and then directly go to them. But I suppose if you don't have that niche subject matter, like your French film with Catherine Deneuve,
maybe a Facebook page and a website isn't really a good use of your time. And it comes back to the self-distribution question, which is, unless there's any undercover high net worths in the room, in which case I'm going to hang around afterwards. We all have to work for a living, and I'm doing bits and pieces, not always affiliated to films I'm making. They're helping other people on different things where I can use skill sets, as we all do. And in that scenario, it's I completely lost my point there. It's about Kajaki,
specific films, niche films. Earning money.
No, it's gone.
Okay.
Valuing your man hours. Yeah, sorry, I've got very short attention.
I was going to just say there's a really good example. Well, I mean, obviously in America, because you could probably only do it in America. I think it was a film, was it Four-Eyed Monster or something, where they built up massive Facebook profile, but they went on tour, so they do the Northwest. Then they'd arrive there in their truck, like a band, start putting posters of this film everywhere. They built up this huge Facebook thing, went and showed all the cinemas about the interest in this film, and the cinema would go, right, fine, knock yourself out, okay, we'll put it on, So they'd clean up there, then they'd moved out to Miami and do the same thing. They made millions doing that. It's really, really, really successful. And they just did everything themselves, everything.
I've got friends who did that with an inflatable cinema, and they made nothing. They went around universities around the UK. They had loads of effort and passion, but they didn't make it. But they got their films screened. They got their idea was to get people to.
These guys made millions
to see it. Really,
literally.
How did they make millions? How did they do that?
They did it bit by bit by bit. Right. So and they did everything themselves. They're keeping all the money.
They're really old-fashioned.
So they're getting a take of the.
But it's film specific. That's the underlying.
Yeah, and it was a horror
lesson.
film.
It doesn't work for everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and.
And they were selling out cinemas. People were queuing up.
So they were booking screens for £500 on a Monday night or something, were they?
They were doing Facebook, so they'd arrive somewhere and start to create a buzz and go to all the coffee shops and stuff like that, and then they'd show the cinemas that they could fill these cinemas,
So they were giving them a free booking.
Massive following, and that's what they do. They'd full it more or less, really, and share the revenue, and then. And then they were doing all their own VOD deals, they were doing all their own TV deals, they were doing all their own whatever deals, basically. So that's a really clever idea. I wish you could do that in the UK. We're probably not big enough,
Bouncing off that, I'm going to try and salvage my muffed point from 2 minutes ago. But it is self-distribution. You have to look at your man hours and in terms of how much time you're spending. And you have to make a decision as to whether it's a hobby, it's something you feel passionate about and want to do, or whether you're trying to earn a minimum wage per hour. And that's the downside with self-distribution. Maybe it's important for the investors and for you, and there's a sense of completion. But actually, when you compare it to doing bar work, it can be far less well paid.
You're completely. I bankrupt myself pretty much self-distributing a film. Over 2 years going around film festivals, and I wasn't working the whole time. And I got to the end of the 2 years and realised all I had was debts.
Yeah.
It was. That was actually during the recession. The interesting bit of bad luck. We're talking about out of town cinemas. Our film was released on the weekend of the coldest. It was the coldest weekend for 60 years, and the police told everybody not to go out, not to go on the roads. But we had released strategically across the northwest, and nearly all the cinemas were in business parks out of town. So nobody went to the cinema for nearly 10 days, I think.
Yeah, it's when the snows came.
In 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And so you can also be incredibly unlucky as well with your release.
Yeah.
You know.
Can I ask a question you probably can't answer? What's the sweet spot of a budget for low indie? $250,000, $1 million, 100 grand to try and make your money back?
Yeah, less.
Like it's
Well,
your
it
first, second film.
used to be 2 million yonks ago. Then it became a kind of million.
Yeah,
Then it became
that's gone
$750,000. Then it was $500,000. Now it's probably under $500,000. Oh yeah, probably about 354 and that.
Right. And how much would you spend on PR and how much on actually making it, percentage-wise?
Well,
You would always hope a distributor
Yeah.
pays you a fortune and spends their own money on PR.
So you'd spend all on the film to get production value up, yeah?
Yeah, I think if you, at the point of budgeting the film, the beginning to building your distribution expenses, that's worrying because hopefully your film will sell for a big MG.
Yeah.
And you know you may not get overages, but a distributor will take on those costs and that
yeah.
activity.
Or you do it yourself. I mean, friends of mine did a film called The Machine. I don't know if you know all that. They did all of that themselves. I mean, killed them. They won't do it again. But they hired a distributor here. They hired coffee and cigarettes to do all the PR. So they basically raised money from private investors, and I think they got some money from content. Content sort of gave them some money because they were a big American sales agent who were kind of relaunching themselves, and they liked that script because it was basically a kind of modern reworking of Frankenstein. So it was a high concept script. So no stars in it. Content sold the film. The filmmakers are, I mean, they're experienced filmmakers, but they're no one. They have no value in the marketplace, and they did a brilliant job of pre-selling that project to foreign territories, which got them enough money plus all their private investors to get the budget to about, it was between nearly $1,850,000, something like that. So it's a decent budget film these days for now, and they decided to do everything themselves with the help of some of their investors, and then put up some P&A money and something. So they hired their own PR, hired their own distributor, did all the VOD deals through an aggregator, did everything themselves.
Content did it all for them.
Yeah, and made money.
I mean, yeah.
So it can be done,
We found that the SEIS £150,000 plus your 25 UK tax credit gets you a budget of about 175,000. If you're going to make a low budget drama, we're talking nobody in it, first time, everybody's first time DPs, first time directors. You can shoot that for the minimum wage and equity, the lower end of equity payments. And you can make a safe set where people are not going to be endangered, where people are having the right turnaround hours. And we found in a couple of circumstances we have made our money back, and we'll probably make a little bit of money over time. So
as in profit, total profit.
As in, yeah.
Right.
But can you use the same investors? Because I mean, finding SEIS investors is not easy now.
The hardest thing we found is there's been so many hope, especially with what happened with sale and leaseback, and there's really high profile arrests and people like David, big footballers haven't paid their money back. We've then had various different producers I won't name who have either gone to prison or have been outed as being very, very dodgy. I had a connection with Barclays Wealth Bank, which is now being is obviously being sued as well, or they've got a criminal investigation. All those high net worth individuals that were investing in films back then in 2008, 2009, they've just disappeared completely.
So where are you SEIS investors coming from then?
It's normally would be a multiple amount of investors through friends and family of those people.
Right.
There are quite a lot of women actually. We've come across quite a lot of women want to make women films. People who've sold a lot of property. Landlords who are selling up now because of the property market's peaked. We've come across a couple of those. And they've got to really, really trust you. They've got to, if there's any thought that you're doing something funny with their money.
You can't actually make a single film now. The SEIS rules have changed.
No, that's that. Yeah, so
HMRC have tweaked them now. They don't see a single film as being a business anymore.
So can you tell everyone about that, including me?
We are going to do a producer evening.
Oh, are you?
On
Okay.
Monday, but yeah, you can do the quick
So
one
basically, they keep moving the goalposts with EIS and SEIS. So you have to really pay attention. But what they've now saying is that because so many people have done single film, so they set up a company, get people to invest in it, make a film, and then wind it up and pay everyone out.
Yeah.
They're saying that's not in the spirit of the legislation. The idea of the scheme is to have start-up businesses that go on and make money and hopefully pay the revenue back through corporation tax and by making a profit, etc. It's not a vehicle just as a tax shelter. So single films are now starting to disallow. I mean, not completely, you can still get them through, it's not impossible, but they are starting to disallow that. So what you have to do now is really a slate. So you have to say, I'm going to be a mega successful film producer, here's 4 films that I'm doing, you know, I'm going to use SEIS to develop these and make them, and then I'm going to produce them and make lots of money for the government. That's what you have to do now, really.
Was it ratified by the EU?
And then you just do your single film and fucking normal.
Was the SEIS ratified by the EU recently? Was it re-ratified?
SEIS?
Yeah, was it re-ratified by the EU? Because somebody, I think someone at a big finance or accountancy company at PFM told me that it might not be ratified again anyway because of EU legislation. Or
No, with the EIS and SEIS, it's part, because we're in the EU still, I think.
Yeah.
There's certain limits as to how much you can raise and how much tax you can reclaim and stuff like that under EU law. So if we leave the EU, that will go. So that's what people are talking about now, really. I mean, they're not going to get rid of it. It's too successful for them. They love it.
It does work, doesn't it? It does give you more tax and it goes out.
Yeah, and I mean, not really for film. I mean, you've got to remember this is used by tech companies. It's used by all companies, really.
Solar energy,
so it's a way to. I mean, George Osborne actually came up with the SEIS, believe it or not. Probably the one half decent thing he did, you know. But the EIS has been around for ages. That was Gordon Brown instituted that back in the day when he did the film tax credit too, you know. So Gordon Brown was very friendly to the film industry. So you know, thank God for Gordon Brown. But George Osborne then created this sort of smaller version of it to try and stimulate the economy and get small businesses going. That's what it's for, really. But it works great for film.
Yeah.
But finding investors is really not easy now. Honestly. It's very
That's our
hard.
next talk.
Very tricky. I think
Finding the money.
on budgets, I think the problem is that if you make a big budget film and you're aggressive about hanging on to your producer fees, then you can make some money and possibly lots of money, but not fortunes. I think the problem is when you're making very, very low budget films, you have to be absolutely convinced that that film is going to pour money in on the back end, and that's where you make your money. So we're shooting an £80,000 horror film in November, and the director and other producer, who's also line producing, they prepared the budget and they put themselves in for £4,000 each. But I know the only reason they're doing that is because they feel that by having me on board to control the sales agents and cap everything and make sure that we're not paying a fortune to external finance companies, people will genuinely get some value back on the back end. It's probably not going to be a fortune, but it will make it worthwhile.
It'll still be made to defer it when you do a deal.
That's it.
Defer your £4,000.
Yeah. but therein is the dilemma. I think it's and the problem is if you go to a third-party finance company who says, look, I'll give you £100,000, but we're going to need £140,000 back before we say you're recouped in the back end, then the idea of back end begins to disappear and becomes the legendary monkey points, as Harvey Weinstein kind of named it, which is, oh, fine, let's argue about it in a contract, but they're not real, they're fictitious. But if you can be in control of the financing, then actually it can work well. And I mean, my view is, it's not always the investor's view, is that if you're making a film for as little money as you can and you're successfully monetizing it, then rather than give the SEIS investors 50% of the back end return, that it should be, no, look, you're not paying a chunk of tax now. Maybe you're also giving them back the tax credit, and they can also claim loss relief, I think, in the same year of their investment, although they'll have to pay that back if the film makes money.
Tax credit, though.
Are you not meant to?
No, that's illegal. You could do it, but don't tell the tax line.
So superior knowledge.
Well, you're not meant to offset the risk. The whole point of this is they're at risk.
Yeah.
You know, they're meant to be potentially losing money. So if you come
But
up with a
they're
clever way of giving them more money back, then they won't get their tax relief.
It's true, but then what this shows is the huge subjectivity that HMRC has versus the PDFs on their website.
Yeah,
and I know a company who it took them a year and an 80 grand legal bill with Wiggins to get it clear, but they managed to get HMRC to agree on an EIS scheme, a risk reduction down to, I think, 12%. And actually all their numbers were spitting out 7%. And HMRC said there is no way we will ever clear that. And after all these legal bills, they settled on 12%. And again, that's the problem. You read on a website of EIS, and apparently 20% of what you raise, you can actually use for non-qualifying activity. It says on the website, but in practice, trying to get HMRC to agree that, you're right, they're just like, no, the risk is minimising too much for us.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, on SEIS, once you've had your initial clearance, they don't care about you, small beer, you know, they're never going to come and look.
Can I write that down? You're being recorded. This is going out across the EU. You're on camera.
Interested in the multi-million fan stuff.
Neil Thompson, experienced UK producer,
My financial advisor.
on record as saying.
I think we need to wrap up because I've run out of beer. Can I ask you one quick question? Just general advice for filmmakers and making money back on making feature films. Tough question, I know. Anything you suggest?
I'll kick in.
What we should do?
There's a and I'm going to hang around afterwards and drink more beer, so my answers will get sloppier, but come and attack me. There is a trend at the moment, and I think it's one of the best trends there is, which we sort of call the Trojan horse. And making a horror film, there is just a plethora of stuff that goes direct to video. So you have to say, well, what's working in the market? How can we value up something like a horror film? And you have to look at 4 films which have popped through, and they're all Trojan horse films in that genre in the last 2 years. And never use a commercial comparable that's more than 2 years old because you'll get laughed out the room. So don't talk about Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity. Those are black marks which will never see your film go through. But the 4 interesting films for us in this space are Under the Shadow, which went worldwide to Netflix, Iranian language, but through a London production company. It Follows, The Witch, and The Babadook. And these are all films that are horror but have made high returns, but they're ostensibly art house films wrapped inside these very palatable genre shells. And so that genre shell ensures that there's some salvage value in the film if it just doesn't execute well, but at least there are some deals to be had worldwide. But it's just, pure genre is really, that's kind of consigned now to sort of the grave of direct-to-video, and even Nicolas Cage-led Bruce Willis kind of cameo role films are beginning to fail commercially. But I would say, rather than just make your passion project about a 14-year-old undergoing an abortion in Huddersfield without the support of the family, it's just like, that's a deeply personal project, but you have to find a way to present it to the market, but then don't feel that you need to make some facile, shallow genre piece. When people discover this sort of art house treat inside this genre shell, they're not pissed off, they're delighted. This film is now over-delivering. But you have to accept that a passion project to yourselves, that's very idiosyncratic to you. You have to find a language and a way of getting that film out to a large audience, but then you don't have to stupefy and dumb down the storytelling inside it. And those are often the films that can break through. So marry the two, and I think, while you can't guarantee success, you can raise your odds substantially.
Excellent. Thank you. Bruce?
Well, yeah. It's a bit like what he said, really. I mean, knowing your audience.
All available on Wikipedia.
Yeah. Look at your comparable films that are around, and know who your audience is before you make it. I mean, I've been trying to make a very dark drama for 5 years. I've been trying to get this thing off the ground, and I've realised the only way I'd make it is private equity or the BFI. I mean, Creative England, no one knows what's actually happened to it. Has it gone under? Is it still around? We don't really know.
BFI's taken over.
Yeah, there's a new head of film.
There's
There's a new head of film, but it looks like Creative England are being slowly moved off.
Yeah.
the one-by-one film funding.
Yeah.
Fund's gone.
iFeatures, I think, will carry on, but the fund, is growing.
So there's very few places you can get your money from if you're making dark drama, and I think you might have to accept you're not going to make money on the film. I think try and take your fees, and you know, that's what a lot of producers and directors do these days. Is just they'll direct or work in TV and they'll make a film as a passion project, and actually the way they'll make money is by taking a fee on it.
Right. Yep.
I have an alternative way. At the moment, as I was saying to Jez before, what struck me at the moment is how obsessed the whole industry is with cast. So go and get cast first. This is what I would do. It's kind of what I'm doing on some big budget stuff, actually, is if you can somehow get to cast, even just with an idea, you don't even have to have a script sometimes, believe it or not, and then create something around that and keep the budget as low as possible, and obviously the bigger the name you can get, the better. Inevitably what happens is that when you actually do manage to finance a film and go to make it, the key piece of cast you had usually drops out anyway. It's inevitable, just because the dates move or whatever. But if you do have cast on a certain level and you've managed to make that work and you've got the budget, you can replace them. I mean, there's actually a market at the moment, believe it or not, for secondary casts. So a lot of our actors, because we're really lucky in this country, because the one thing we have is loads of brilliant actors who are stars. It's the one commodity we have which is actually really, really valuable. Everything else we have is worth fuck all and it's gone to shit because the Americans own it all. But that's the one thing we do have, and you know, and they are worth lots of money. And not only that, they're brilliant in that they do the American stuff for money, and then they'll do decent stuff here. Like, you know, James McAvoy will go and do a bit of fringe theatre in a pub in Earl's Court for a month because he can. You know, then he'll go and do some shitty Marvel comic thing for $6 million or however much he earns, you know. But, you know, actors want to flex their muscles. They want to do good stuff. They don't just want to work on shit day after day after day after day, you know. And you can get to them. I mean, it's hard. It's not easy, but you can. And they are interested in doing stuff. And having a key piece of talent on board, and it'll get you a long way in this industry. It really does. Even if in the back of your mind, you know you're probably not going to have them when push comes to shove and you have to make the film. But the great thing about actors is they can be replaced. And what I was saying is there's actually a market grown up now where in America they do a thing called pay or play. So the big companies buy actors anyway. So if you want Brad Pitt for October for your film, you pay him now, stick 30% of the money in an escrow account, he's booked, he's yours, you know. If your film then moves and you can't do it, tough, you've lost that money. So all the big actors are on pay or play deals all the time now, because all certain kind of coterie of actors, and I'm saying the top 170, I don't mean just the top 10, are so busy now on TV, on major TV and films and everything, in that they're all doing sort of pay or play deals, and quite often those things fall through, so they come back on the market again. So what's basically happening is they're now available, even though they've been paid for that, because their agent thinks that thing's not going to happen. So you can get them cheap. It's actually a market. There's a guy in Germany running it. So you can get, I mean, I know someone just got Olga Kurylenko recently for a knockdown price because the film she was doing fell through. So I think, you know, I mean, I think I could probably tell you what the price was. It was like 250,000 euros or something. It was nothing. You know, because it's a nice bit of bung for her. You don't care. You know, a couple of weeks' work, whatever it was, you know. So there you go. It's like, you know, there's like some weird Wembley street market has occurred with actors now, you know, which I've never heard of before. So it's all completely new, and it's like, you know, so I would go for talent first. Forget all these weird and wonderful scientific things about what you're doing, you know, because if you can get talent interested in your film, even if it's not genre, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't, you know. In fact, you know, different things now are interesting, and that's what people want. People want things that are more diverse. They want things that are a little bit more interesting, that are a little bit more out of the box. People are just bored in this genre now, really, unless you're, you know, doing this sort of $4 million Nicolas Cage thing that all these American companies do because they know they can sell it around the world for $8 million and they can shoot it in Canada for cheap. So that's a business, you know, and they trot these things out, which is why you see all these shit films everywhere, you know, because they can. And again, they're doing the same thing. You know, they use Wesley Snipes, Nicolas Cage, it's all the same actors because they still have a value in other parts of the planet that can make you your money back. You know, they're not stars in America anymore, but they are in Kazakhstan, and you know.
It's interesting what you just said. That is really, it was true. I think Julie Baines, the producer, said it to me that if you are making something low budget, make it. You just said, you repeating what you said. Really, make it completely original. Make it like nothing that's ever been. And that's what we did with Nina Forever. Where it was, nothing had been made like that, and that's why it was successful, because it was a horror genre comedy, and it was, you know, but it had a twist to it that hadn't been done before. Yeah. And that's what I always seem to be looking for in scripts, something that a story I've never heard about.
It's true. Critics, that my first ever film was a co-producer, a film called The Borderlands, and it was £100,000 budget. It is a bit patchy as a watch, but we absolutely pushed ourselves on sort of themes and subtext, and bizarrely we found that critics rewarded us for ambition. I think we managed to get 4 stars in the Times, the Guardian, the Metro. And I didn't see a 4-star film when I watched it, but then I've released films which are just perfect, you know, finished pieces of genre, you know, with a beautiful sheen and luster. But if they lack ambition or originality, critics will rob a star off you out of spite, and then suddenly you're getting 2-star reviews for very well made, very well produced films. Whereas the odd little patchy original film is suddenly getting 4 stars because they reward originality. Yeah. And if critics give you 4 stars, that film has a lot more value than if they give it 2 stars. And you can leverage that value for international sales, SVOD, UK.
Brilliant stuff. All good. Yep. Any questions before we drink more beer? We can ask questions while drinking beer. Probably easier.
Multitask.
No, didn't do festivals. Why do you want to ask a question?
Bruce is your man there. He's Mr. Festival.
Touched on it.
Yeah.
What was it?
Specific.
What we think of it now and how it's kind of.
I think. I ran the Isle of Wight Film Festival for 10 years and closed it down a few years ago because there's so many festivals, and we had to trawl through 800, 900 films and to find 5 or 6 good feature films for the feature film section. But with my low budget films that I've made, the feature film market has been fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the feature film festival market has been fantastic. I mean, it was at Carla Vivari that a film I did called Be All and End All got noticed, which then got into Sight and Sound, which then got picked up by Verve, which then sold well, considering the recession at the time. So certainly with the children's market, children's film festivals is unbelievably rich. So each children's festival, so like Buster or each major European country has one, the buyers will go to those individual festivals. So for children's, but you'll find if you go to Stratford Film Festival, there'll be no buyers there, there'll be no sales made, and it's of no real use apart from building an audience maybe. So certainly getting those rosettes on your poster really makes the film look like it's, I mean, but the problem is if the rosettes say, you know, Sunderland Film Festival, then it's very, very different from Sundance.
In Bruce's case, they all said Isle of Wight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or IOW for a different one, yeah. But something like Nina Forever that got into South by Southwest, that completely changed that film overnight. Yeah. Or the film we were talking about earlier, Snow in Paradise, very low budget, East End gangster film, first time director, Match Factory picked it up, who were a French sales agent, and then got it into Cannes. It was in Director's Fortnight, and it completely changed that film overnight. So I definitely say, and there's an industry around film festivals. People make loads of money. Yeah. I mean, I had an intern working for me, sending out films to festivals, and they put in a film to something called I can't remember, it was a Hawaiian Film Festival. It cost us $90, and we had to pay £500 to get the award that we'd won. So, and when we since found out that it was actually screened in a swimming pool with people lying around on lilos watching the film. So there is an industry around the film festivals. There's a lot of bullshit. The best thing you can do is go to the London screenings, which is similar things to the production finance market. It's run by Film London. There's something called a Breakthrough Strand, which you guys will go, I'm sure you go to, and we've been in it twice now with a film with no distributor, no sales, and we've been picked up by sales agents there. It costs £100 to enter, I think.
Yeah, it's more of a B2B platform, but
that's
back up everything you say that, you know, 20 rosettes from fairly low-ranking international film festivals are meaningless to a distributor.
Yeah.
And in fact, festivals are good to bring a film to the attention of a distributor, but even if we're in, we would not suddenly buy a film because it had been in the top tier of Berlin, Toronto, Cannes, Sundance, South by Southwest. And famously films, like Sundance films, which can go for a fortune, often tend to flop on their arse when they come out in the UK market because it's so North American orientated. I think a sales agent will see a key film festival as a good launch and a chance to get PR and reviews and coverage if it's a Berlin, a Cannes, Toronto, Sundance. And then I think, otherwise, people just aren't really communicating or connecting. They feel
Festivals are not a tour thing, really. Festivals are for auteurs. So if you're a kind of, like Yorgos, whatever his name is, that Greek director, festivals love him. Lars von Trier has made his living out of festivals, really, because festivals love him, festival juries love him, and he'll go on into an interview and say something mental to get loads of publicity, If you want, everyone will walk out or whatever, But he's a genius at working that, and then his films do really well on that niche circuit because there is festival films.
There is money to be made out of festivals because we get up to £1,000 or €1,000 per screening. So you got a film like Nearly Forever that was in 34 festivals. And you think how many, if it was $500 per screening on a 150 grand film, you're seeing some money coming in, and also you can get you missed this at the beginning, you get your video on demand aggregator or your aggregator to turn on those potentially you can get them to turn on the territories as your film tours in festivals, a bit like the way the music industry is going now, where so you'll make your film available, you won't do a 16-week release, you'll make your film available in that territory, you'll show it at a film festival, and then it's immediately available there. And certainly with Nearly Forever, the directors were turning up and selling DVDs from the front of the,
It's also a bit of a racket these days, to be honest with you.
It is.
I mean, a lot of festivals are just creaming it, really,
There's a good documentary the BBC did, I think, or a group of filmmakers did about a dodgy film festival down in the southwest somewhere.
Yeah.
And they did this revealing documentary
They
about, and actually I think their documentary probably did better than their film that was in the festival.
Cool. Right, thank you very much, guys. That's just fantastic.
Cheers. Thanks. That's great.
Yeah.